This video is the second part of my chicken coop build. In the first video I built the frame and the roof, and in this part I'll start making the hen house. The 4 chicks from the first video are growing fast. We've had them from a day old and it turns out that they're all roosters. We won't be keeping all of these guys, so we got another 4 chicks, but this time we made sure that they were sexed so we know that we've got hens. I'm starting with the floor of the hen house by fixing some horizontal studs. I need the floor studding to be flush with the front of the main frame, so I'm using some shorter scraps to fill them in. And for the floor I'm using 12mm structural plywood. It isn't weatherproof, but it shouldn't actually be exposed. I'm sealing the edges anyway, as some extra protection can't hurt. Although chickens aren't that heavy, I decided to add another stud across the centre just to strengthen the floor up a bit. Now I'm adding some horizontal studs to create openings for some doors and windows. I'm adding a piece again to flush up the face of the frame, but this time I'm offsetting by about ½ an inch to create a rebate for the doors to sit in. I'll fill in the top section by adding a few studs before fixing plywood from the inside, and then later I'll be adding weatherboards to finish it off. The 2 sides will have windows. This side will have a panel below the window, and on the other side there'll be a nesting box at the bottom. I'm offsetting the studs again to create a rebate for the window. The inside wall of the hen house is just 1 plywood panel across the whole thing. These panels are really adding some strength to the main frame and stopping it from racking. I'm just working a lot of this out as I go and fixing where I can from wherever works out best. This centre post was always coming out. It was just easier to build the end panel like this and then cut it out afterwards. That's the hen house well on its way. Next I'll head back into the workshop to start making some windows. But before I do that, I'm excited to announce the Makers Mob Father's Day sale, where you can get your first full month all access pass at almost zero cost. For 99 cents, inside the Makers Mob, you'll not only learn from my tutorials, but also get exclusive access to 80 plus woodworking projects from YouTube's top makers like Jimmy DeResta, the Samurai Carpenter, Liam Hoffman, Frank Howarth and John Hayes, who now all have projects live inside the Makers Mob. If you're watching this video before the end of the Father's Day weekend, then this offer is still available. Simply click the link in the description below and we'll all see you there on the inside. I'm using half lap joints to join the windows, and that will make them super strong and keep them square. For the glass, I've got this old clear fluted sheeting. It's a bit scratched and the ants have made a home in there, but it'll be perfect for this use. It didn't cut that easy with a knife, but on the second one that I made off camera, I used the table saw and that was much easier. Now I'm cutting some beads from an old hardwood decking board to hold the glass in place. Rather than go out and buy clear silicone, which would have been more suitable, I used this grey, which I already had, and made sure to be careful and not get it everywhere. The middle beads are purely for show, but I reckon they look good and worth that small amount of extra effort. I waited for them to set before turning the window over and then fixing the beads on the other side with nails going through and into the back of the opposite beads. I hadn't fixed the rail under the second window, so I did that now, ready for when I install the nesting box below. Now the windows are done, I'll start making the doors that access the hen house. I've already put them together as they're made the same as the windows, and these doors are actually two doors with one inside the other. I have a heap of these old weatherboards, so I'm making use of them to dress the doors up a bit. I know someone will comment about how I'm using the saw here, but I can assure you I'm perfectly safe as every part of my body is to the right of the saw and not reaching across in front of the blade. It just looks a bit odd from the camera angle. To fit the top board, I trimmed it down first off camera on the table saw. The outer door opens for access into the hen house, and the inner door opens for some cross ventilation on hot days. The inner door can be left open, and that's the reason for installing the mesh. These barrel bolts really aren't very good. I bought the cheapest ones and I'll probably change them later on. I made the deep litter door off camera because it was using the same method as I used on the other doors. The idea of the deep litter method is to keep adding layers of bedding to the hen house, and after 6 to 12 months the composted bedding can be removed, and that's what the full length door is for. We use this method with our last coop and it works very well, and it surprisingly doesn't smell at all. I had to cut a piece off either end of the stop to allow the two upper doors to go past, and that catch at the top of the doors is just a temporary measure. Now onto the nesting box. Here's all the pieces, and I prepared those off camera. I've cut and painted these plywood panels to fill in the frame, and I'll attach those with construction adhesive and brad nails. One thing I should have done differently was to put the nesting boxes a touch higher to allow for the deep litter. I was thinking more about the kids getting the eggs out at the front, so I put this thin strip of wood across, and I actually did change that later on for a taller piece. There's still plenty of room though for the chucks to easily access the nests. That's the nesting box complete, so next I'll cut an opening for the chucks to access the house. Now it's time to dress it up a bit by adding some weatherboards. I thought about installing mesh on the top of the inside wall, but there'd be a slight chance of sideways rain getting in, so I decided to fill it in with plywood. Now I'll start adding mesh to the coop, but first I'll add a rail all the way around. This will hopefully stop the goats from pushing and destroying the mesh. If I need to, I'll add another rail later on. That came out pretty neat and was easier to keep flat than I thought it was going to be. Next I need to add some trim. To keep the cost down, I used cheap garden edging and the girls gave it a couple of coats of paint before I used it. I did think about setting up a miter saw outside, but I reckon it's easier to take the measurements and then cut them at my miter saw station, and it's only a few yards away anyway. The trim for the underneath of the deep litter door needs a chamfer putting on so the door can be opened up enough to be able to clean out the henhouse. I'm finding this little 12 volt planer pretty handy and it's awesome for a task like this. That's the final piece of trim in place, and next I'll add fascia boards to the front and the back. That's the end of the day, and the next day the chucks are going to move in. For that to happen, I need to make a door, a roost and a ramp, and today we're also picking up a couple of bantam hens. The door is made the same way as the other doors and windows, but the only difference with this one is it has a centre rail. That's the door done. Next I'm rounding over a piece of hardwood, and that's for the roost. There's still plenty more to do on the coop, but for the chucks to move in, I just need to make a ramp. They seem to be happy scratching around, and the girls look like they're settling in too. Now onto the predator mesh. I was going to dig the turf up and relay it over the mesh, but instead I've decided to peg it down and let the grass grow through it. I've done this before and it works well, it just takes time, especially this time of year when the grass hardly grows. We're going to capture water from the roof and store that in a 200 litre barrel, so here I'm making a quick base for the barrel to sit on. I drilled that hole in the wrong place. I then added a piece of trim over the top and I re-drilled it. For the chickens to drink out of, I'm installing these automatic drinking cups that we bought off eBay. I put a removable cap on the end so the system can be flushed out every now and again. Now that it's all plumbed in, I need to make a gutter to capture the rain, and I'm using an old roof batten which will make the perfect size gutter. I'm flattening one of the edges. That will be the back of the gutter and will be easy to screw straight to the fascia board. I didn't have a piece long enough, so I had to join two pieces together. The fitting for the downpipe was a bit big, but I shaped the downpipe to fit, and you'll see that a bit later on. We had a few showers and that tested out the gutter and it worked great. Here's that piece of pipe that I shaped to fit the gutter, and once it's sealed in, it doesn't look out of place at all. I'm adding a piece of gauze from an old sieve, but I may find something to do a better job later on. I also added an overflow pipe with a piece of gauze to stop any critters from getting into the barrel. Now the water's sorted out, I'll move on to making a feeder. I made a simple one out of plywood and gave it a few coats of non-toxic water-based varnish. I've got a piece of the fluted polycarbonate sheet just big enough for the front, and because it's clear you can see how much food is there and when it needs refilling. I made one like this for our last coop and it worked perfectly. The only thing I may have to do is make an angle top to stop them from sitting on it and making a mess. Now I'm doing the final touches. I did a bit of painting here and there. I added some stays to the windows just so they can stay open. Nice and simple, but they do the job. And I added some catches to the doors. I think the chickens like it, hopefully you do too, and hopefully you enjoyed the video. And if you're making a coop or thinking about making a coop, you got some ideas from it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out the Makers Mob, and I'll see you on the next one.